before the beginning of the year, I'm always just, especially when we're coming up on a new year, I'm asking God, God, what are you wanting to speak to our church as a whole? What's the direction? And there was a word that I just couldn't leave. They just kept bringing back. And it was stretch. That God was wanting to stretch us this year. I didn't know exactly yet where that was going, but I still feel God's wanting to stretch us this year. I've shared that with our staff. I shared it with our board, and I've been waiting of when, and finally feel that God's saying now's the time to begin to share. So we're starting a new series, and I don't know how long it will be, but we're going to call it Stretch Marks. How many know what some of those are? You know, I realize whenever you are stretched, there's marks behind that's left. And I believe that's true in the spirit world too. That when you stretch your faith, there's markings that are left at each moment. Your life experience with God, your faith, spiritual faith, I believe can be looked back as a series of markings in your life. Where you were stretched here, you were stretched there, and God did something here and He did something there. Do you not have those moments in your life where you were marked? It changed you. There's physical signs that it changed you. When Jacob encountered God at the age of around 100 years old, and he wrestled with an angel overnight, and he wouldn't let go. There was something within him, his faith, that said, I won't let you go unless you bless me. He was marked then for the rest of his life at that one encounter, because the angel touched his hip and dislocated his hip, and he walked from that point on differently because of a moment of marking in his life. And I believe this, that those marks in your life will change the way you walk. They'll change the way you live. They'll change the way you react. They'll change the way you see things. And He's calling us to stretch. Amen? To stretch this year. To stretch. And this is I want to read where He kept leading me as the example. And it's in Mark chapter 3. And I just want to read the story to you, the very beginning of it. It says, and He entered the synagogue again. It's Jesus entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a withered hand. So they watched him closely, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. Have you ever noticed that religious people will look at your flaws and that's all they see? That they will identify you with what your flaw is in life? The man with the withered hand. There's two people they're watching. They're watching Jesus. They're watching the man with the withered hand. wanting to know what's going to happen at this moment, what will take place. And it says, and he said to the man who had the withered hand, step forward. And he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they kept silent. And when he had looked around at them with anger, we know Jesus looks with a mean look sometimes. I know we picture him always a smile on his face. He didn't have a smile on his face right now as he's looking at the crowd. With a mean look. With anger. Being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. I'm going to preach to you this morning on just simply stretch out. Just stretch out. Get out of your comfort zone. Stretch out. You know, when you begin to stretch, it begins to hurt at first. Have you ever just you were going to work out, so you went to stretch first, and it felt like the workout had happened right then? I don't need to run now. Just try to touch my toes. I'm done stretched. It hurt. It was uncomfortable. I feel like God's wanting to take us to a place out of our comfort zone and stretch us this morning. Amen. Tell you what, before you're seated this morning, we just look at your neighbor, tell him it's time to stretch. Time to stretch this morning. You can be seated.
I was really focusing on the story of this, and you got to realize, I hope you're not in trouble because I've been focusing on this story for months. What did I get? Somebody's scared. I caught that nervous laugh right then. There's two things that just kept pointing out that here in this story right here, there's two people in the whole crowd that's noticed. Two people. You have Jesus and you have the man with the withered hand. That's the only people that's really pointed out. Those are the ones that's noticed. Those are the ones that all the focus was on these two people. Jesus and the man with the withered hand. The one who had the noticeable problem. And the other was the one who was able to heal the one with the problem. And the stage is set for the miracle at this moment of what's going to take place. And everybody's looking. Everybody's wanting to know, what will he do? Will the miracle happen? Will he heal on the Sabbath? Will he do this? Even though it's unlawful, even though we've set the rules and it's not lawful for him to heal on the Sabbath, will he heal on the Sabbath? Because we notice this one person with the problem, and we notice the one who has the answer, who is the answer. And I kind of feel sorry for the man with the withered hand. As I kept reading this and going over this and looking at it again and again, there became and I don't have the gift of mercy. I don't have sympathy, but I began to feel for the man with the withered hand, even though that's out of my nature. I began to feel for him because here he was, everybody's staring at him because he has a problem. I mean, I love it when everybody seems to stare at you, or at least that's how it feels, that everybody's looking at me because there's something wrong that I'm going through. And that's what everyone is staring at this one man. just staring at him. Why? Because he has a problem. And I'm sure he already felt different. I'm sure he already felt like he didn't belong. And I feel for the man, because when you have something wrong in your life, the last thing you want is for attention to be drawn to it. Right? I mean, when there's something that you're going through in your life, the last thing you want is for attention to be drawn to it. We want everybody to ignore the problem, but everybody is focused on this one guy just because he has a problem. And when we post stuff on Facebook, we don't post our problems. Well, some of us do, but it's because it's really, but you shouldn't. That's part of your problem. But, amen. Don't let everybody know your problem. I mean, we don't want the focus just on what we're going through. We usually want to hide it, what we're going through. And I can just picture this man, because the only thing wrong with him is he has a withered hand. Just one. His other hand is good. He just has one bad hand, and he has one good hand. And our tendency, I'm sure was his also, is that you focus on what is good in your life, and you hide what is bad. And I can just see him walking around, and he just kind of hides the bad hand, keeps the hand in his pocket. I don't know if they had pockets then. They should. I mean, it's a cool invention. Just kind of covering it up. Shows off the good hand and doesn't want the attention drawn to what's wrong in his life. I had a friend that I grew up with. A good friend, as a pastor's kid also. We were close from camps, and we stayed in touch. He also, when got called in the ministry, and he preached, and whenever I finally was surrendering to the call of the ministry, and I didn't know even how to get started. I remember I called him up because he was pastor, and I said, I've got messages, I just don't know how to preach, and he began to work behind the scenes. I didn't even know it. I mean, we're just good friends. One thing about this guy, and I knew him as a teenager throughout, his left hand, he was born with a deformity. And his left hand was smaller and deformed, smaller than his other hand. The odd thing about this, I didn't even know it. I knew him for years. And it was finally someone just said, man, whatever happened to Gary? I was like, what do you mean? His hand. I never noticed it because he was so good at hiding it. I even went back on Facebook today because I was trying to figure out which hand that was. And I'm going through all the pictures of him, and I noticed that one's always in his pocket. So good at hiding it. You know, he was talented. I mean, he could play the guitar almost like Solomon. Somebody's got a message up there. You might want to vibrate that next time. I don't know. Get my focus off. He was so good at hiding it. And he could play guitar. He could play drums. He could play the piano. I mean, as a high school performance, he played Jerry Lee Lewis's what's his Great Balls of Fire. I mean, and just tore it up on the piano. And he would take that left hand, and you would see him as he's taking it. He got that one finger, and he's just going nuts with his right and just playing everything. Was so good. He was so good at hiding his bad hand that I didn't even notice it. We were close, good friends for years before I ever noticed it. He never offered that. And I think it's kind of in the same way, because I feel that this man probably did his best to hide the bad hand. This man with the withered hand, I'm sure as he's coming into the synagogue, trying to fit in, trying to find his place, whenever someone's welcoming him, he always puts out his good hand. How are you? We want to show people our good stuff, what we can do, and hide what we can't. Come on now. Because we go through this in our life. We go through it in our life of if something's going on wrong and I have a problem here, I don't want to show people that. I'll come up to them and if they ask, how you doing? I'm doing good. Let me show you my good hand. What I can do, what I do have going on in my life, what is right, and just don't pay any attention to my deformities. Don't pay any attention to my problems. Don't pay any attention to where I can't do what someone else can do. Let me just show you my good side in my life. And Jesus first for the guy already because coming up on you and you can relate to him a little bit. And if you want to feel even worse for him, now Jesus, with everybody staring at him, calls him out to the front. Go ahead. Hey man, with the withered hand, why don't you step forward? I mean, I know from preaching, that's the worst thing to do. Sometimes when I feel a little mean, I'll call the person that I know is real shy and tell them to step up and let them be the example. Like right now when I'm talking to you, and I know that kind of bothers you a little bit, and all the focus right now is on you. It's tough, isn't it? Can you feel for the man? I mean, he's just, yeah. And they say, step forward. And the man's like, seriously? I was trying to sneak in today. I don't want, and he's walking up kind of, just, what you got? What's it, Jesus? Let me hide this. And here's the thing that God does that is so remarkable. God's wanting to do something in really the lives and the hearts of the other people. He's going to focus on the hearts of everyone else that is messed up. But in order to preach his message, to reach their hearts, he uses the example, the illustration of a man with a problem. Oh, why does he do that? Because he does, doesn't he? He takes your problem and he uses it as an illustration of how he healed and how he worked it out. And he uses you and your problem and your mess ups and your mistakes and your just the witheredness of your life. And he uses that, the broken pieces, and says, if you'll allow me, I know it's a little uncomfortable. I know that it takes a little stretching in your life. And I know you really don't want me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you'll allow me, I'm going to call you forward and put you front and center, and I'm going to highlight your deformities. I'm going to highlight your problems, and I'm going to use your mistakes in your life as an illustration to change the hearts of everybody else around you. And we hate it. But I've learned it's in the stretching of those moments, those uncomfortable moments, that he does the most. So he calls the man forward. And he looks around. And he already looks mean, so I'm sure the man's a little nervous. Because he just scans the crowd and he's got this angry look on his face. Jesus does. And he looks at the man. Stretch your hand out. Okay, that's my thinking. Because we're so used to showing off our good stuff. That's just how I picture it. My bad hand's in my pocket I just made. I just invented pockets just for this. Stretch out your hand. No, not that hand. I know you can do that. I want you to stretch out your other hand. But this hand's no good. This hand's messed up. And here's the part of the story that if you read it, it says that he was obedient, that he stretched out his hand, and his hand was restored. And I think it's important that you realize the order in which it goes through this. It says he stretched out his hand and his hand was restored. His hand was healed. It didn't say his hand was restored and he stretches it out. It says he stretched out his hand and his hand was restored. It was healed, made whole. He stretched out his hand and his hand was restored. We always want it to be the other way around. That when God calls us to do something, and here's the tough thing, when He calls us on something and He calls us to stretch our faith at that moment, because it's in the stretching of our faith that the miracles happen. It's when we stretch our faith that the miracle takes place. We want to look down and see our hands already healed, and then we want to show it off. But that's not how the order of it happened. It didn't say that the man looks down as Jesus says, stretch out your hand. He looks and he goes, okay, it's healed. Hey, look, everybody. No, he looks down and it's still a withered hand. And there's got to be something within him that am I going to stretch? And as I stretch, a healing comes, or am I going to just hold it back? Because we've been praying for miracles to happen, and I think it's got to a place that God's saying, I've called you to stretch a little bit here. I've called you to do something that's a little uncomfortable. I'm stepping you out front and center and saying, why don't you do something? And if you've got the faith to do it, if you've got the boldness to do it, if you'll finally begin to stretch yourself a little bit, then the miracles will happen. But until you begin to stretch, you're just going to stare and only be known as the person with the withered hand. In order to see the miracle, though, you've got to stretch. But I want to see the miracle, and then I'll stretch. I want to see the results first, and then God, I'll gladly show it off. So instead, when He calls us to do something, we just still, well, I can do this. Why am I not seeing miracles happen? Because maybe I'm just still sticking out at what I can do. Maybe I'm just wanting to work in my giftings and my abilities and my talents and what God's blessed me with, and I just want to keep showing off this and think God's going to do something more out of it when He's asking for the other hand. He's asking me to do something I can't do. That's when the stretching takes place. When you decide, I'm going to do something I can't do, and see if God will work out of this. Because as long as I keep doing what I can do, there's never a place for the miracles to happen. I get highlighted still. It's always me they see as long as I keep stretching out what I can do. But if I get to a place of real stretching, those marks and moments in my life that I say, look, God, I'm going to trust you so much, I'm going to begin to do things that I can't do. Because when I do something that I can't do, then it's you who gets the glory. So I'm going to stretch out my hand. Something I can't do. I don't know if you realize this, because I've wondered, God, what was the significance? Why did you tell him to stretch? You were wanting to make an example. You were wanting to teach this Jewish culture at this moment, change a heart within them. Why did you use this man with the withered hand? And your words to him was just simply stretch out your hand to change a heart. Can I tell you, God always works that way, and he was reminding them. When they were in Egypt, in the Old Testament, let's go back to Old Testament here. When they were in Egypt in the Old Testament, and Moses was in the desert area. He's there for 40 years because he wanted to deliver the people, and he decided to do what he could do. He kills a man at that moment, then runs because that wasn't God's plan. It was Moses' plan of I'll just do what I can do. And he's now on the backside of a desert tending sheep and been there for 40 years. And God begins to then speak to him that I'm going to use you, Moses, to deliver my people. And there's something, I believe, we just got off purposes and dreams and fulfilling their destiny. And I just think there's something within Moses just rising up, because now he's remembering a dream that he had over 40 years ago when he saw the pains of his people, and he saw what they were going through, and he saw their slavery, and there was something within him that wanted to deliver them, but he did it without God. So he's banished, and he's 40 years in hiding and running on the backside of a desert, and now God speaks to him in a burning bush, and all of a sudden he's speaking the dreams back, that I'm going to deliver my people, and something's rising up within Moses at this moment. And watch, because Moses knows, I tried this before, and I can't do this because I used my hand. And watch what God tells Moses in Exodus 3 and verse 20. He tells him something different. He tells Moses, I will stretch out my hand this time. I will. God speaking. Moses before, I'll do it my way, God. I'll stretch out my good hand. I'll try and do what I can do. And God speaks to him this time at this moment and says, it's going to be different. Moses, this time I'll deliver him, because I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt. I will stretch out my hand and I'll show them all my wonders, which I will do in its midst. And after that, he will let you go when I stretch out my hand. And I'm thinking, that's what I want. I want God to stretch out his hand. I want God, come on now, I want God to stretch out his hands and show signs and wonders. In Exodus or in Acts chapter 4, whenever they were first, and this isn't on the screen, it's just something that, because I've been studying it for a long time, that whenever the church was going through bondage and they finally were being persecuted, they were scared that they weren't going to make it, so they prayed to God. They said, give us boldness, and you stretch out your hand in healing, in miracles, and wonders. And I think that's what I want. I want God to stretch out his hand. Miracles and healings and wonders. So he tells Moses again, because now Moses has left the burning bush, and he's now standing, getting ready to stand before Pharaoh, and he needs this reassurance, and God speaks to him again now in chapter 7, verse 5, and it says, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand on Egypt and bring out the children of Israel from among them. Man, I want that. In other words, God's saying, I see your situation. Let's get back to the withered man. His hand, withered hand. He wasn't, I like that he wasn't the withered man. He was a man with just a withered hand, because God doesn't let your problems define who you are. He'll point out your problems, but it doesn't define you. He wasn't the withered man. He was just a man with a withered hand. See how when you mess up, you just kind of turn it around. Turn it into a point. So to the children of Israel, just like with this man with the withered hand, and just like you, what I like is that it's saying, I see your problem. You might not think I haven't noticed you, but I see your problem. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to deliver you. I'm going to set you free. I'm going to heal you. I'm going to do these things. God, I'm going to stretch out my hand over the situation. That's what I want. When I'm going through something, right, when my family is being shaken, when the problems and you're dealing with those situations, you want God to look at you and say, hey, I'm going to stretch out my hand over this, and I'm going to deliver you, and I'm going to heal you, and I'm going to take care of this. God, I promise I am going to stretch out my hand over this. I want that. But let me show you how it happens. Let me show you, because this was God reminding Moses in chapter 7, verse 5, I believe it was, that I'll stretch out my hand. So now, as it's time for the first plague in Egypt, still in the same chapter, verse 19 now, it says, God speaks to Moses again. He says, now say to Aaron, take out your rod and stretch out your hand. God, I thought you were going to stretch out your hand. Yeah. You tell Aaron, take out his rod and stretch out your hand. Take out your rod and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt. Take out your hand and stretch. God, I can't do that. There's no signs and wonders and miracles in my hand. You said you would stretch out your hand and that miracles would follow, and that wonders and signs, and that all Egypt would know that you're God because you stretched out your hand. And now it's the very first plague. You're going to turn the water into blood. This is the very first one. And now you're saying that you want me to stretch out my hand. But he does it. And as Aaron stretches out his hands over the water, over the streams, over the rivers, their ponds, he's just going around. Just Aaron, there's some water there. Woo. There's some water. And he's stretching out the water becomes blood. 10 of the plagues, I was reading this. 10 of the plagues that were made, 6 of those God spoke. At first it was, tell Aaron, stretch out your hand. Then it moved to, Moses, you just stretch out your hand. 6 of the 10 plagues that fell upon Egypt happened from God saying, you stretch your hand. I think he's trying to get something into them. I think he's trying to speak to them at this moment and setting up a principle that I believe it's still following. Because watch, whenever they finally get set free, they're running from the Egyptians. They've made it, and at first it's all joyful because, hey, we left Egypt. But then they realize there's a big army chasing us. And Moses, you done led us to the Red Sea. And there's no bridge. You didn't plan ahead. If you knew we were coming this direction, you had 40 years. You could have built us a bridge that we could have walked across. But no. You just led us to the sea. And now the Egyptian army's right behind us. And they're crying and they're complaining. And Moses is scared. And he's crying out to God, I don't know what to do. God, you got to do something. And watch this, because God looks down. And I love how he answers because God has a spirit of sympathy too. And look at this in chapter 14 and verse 15. The Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? I think it's up there. You might be, yeah, look at that. God in just the softness of his heart. You ever feel like he does that to you? Why are you crying to me? Why? Why are you crying to me? I've set up some kind of principle for you. Why are you crying to me? You know what to do by now. Why are you crying to me? Go ahead, tell the children of Israel. Just go forward. And I'm sure Moses, but there's water forward. We can't walk on that. We'll drown. If I lead them there, we'll all drown. And you don't even care. You're just saying, why are you crying to me? Just go ahead, walk on forward. But watch what he tells him to do. He's setting up the principle. The next verse it says, help me out. And I was waiting like, where? But lift up your rod, okay? I got my rod, yeah. And stretch out your hand over the sea. Stretch out. Why are you crying to me? Why? You've got what you need. Go ahead, lift up your rod, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. Stretch out your hand. What's he doing here? Here's what the principle is that he's starting to set up at this moment. If you'll stretch out your hand in faith, I'll stretch out my hand and do the miracle. If you stretch out your hand, then I'll stretch out my hand and wonders will happen. But until you stretch out your hand, until you begin to stretch a little bit, until you begin to stretch out on something you can't do, then I won't be able to work. But when you pull out that witheredness, that brokenness, that hand that you thought is no good, and you say, I'll stretch it for you, God. I'll stretch it out. I don't know how it's going to work. I might look like a fool, but God, I'll stretch. And when you stretch out your hand, God stretches out his hand at the same time. And as you stretch, he stretches. And as you move, he moves. And as you pull, oh, come on, somebody. He's looking for someone to stretch. and not your bad hand. Man with the withered hand, and God's wanting to make a point to this crowd around, and he's looking at their hearts, and he's seeing how religion is set in. Calls the man forward with the withered hand, and he says, "It's your turn now. What are you going to do? My command to you would be stretch out your hand." Same command that the God standing in front of this man, the same command he spoke to Moses. Stretch out your hand. But it's withered. It's broken. It's messed up. I don't know how you could use it. I failed trying before. I've just learned to deal with it, hide it. Why don't I just stick with what I can do? You can do, I won't do what you can't. All right, then I'll stretch. And as he stretched, God's hand stretched over his hand. Church, you want to see the miracles of God? You want to see his hand move? I wonder, why did the church, when they were going through something, they asked God for boldness and then prayed that you would stretch out your hand, God? Because it's boldness to do something that you can't do. That when you do something you can't do, God's hand moves in that midst at that moment. So as I stretch out my hand, he stretches out his. And here's the thing that hit me. God put in us that we control in a way. We don't control the hand of God. Look, we don't control the hand of God, so don't go tweeting, "Pastor said I control God." No. Whether he'll stretch. And as I stretch, as I do something that hurts, as I do something that's uncomfortable, as I do something that I can't do, that is totally out of my comfort zone, out of my area, out of my abilities, as I stretch, he stretches. I want you to stand with me this morning. Oh God. And here's the thing that I get. The very area of your life that you have been hiding and that you're ashamed of. The very area of your life that right now feels broken. That right now it feels deformed. Right now it feels messed up. Right now it feels like there's no hope. And you've been trying to avoid avoid the attention of it all. That's the area that God's saying, why don't you stretch? Because if you want me to move, if you want me to stretch out my hand, I'm going to